Okay, so this is the college algebra chapter 2 test review, and we're just going to go through the questions pretty much as quickly as I can and just pause it where you need or have questions. The first question is what type of graph is this? It looks like that. Well, a graph that goes off to the right, sort of this half parabola on its side, is a square root graph. So it is important that you know all the basic graphs by kind of image, so that you can kind of tell, okay, that's a square root, there's your quadratic, here's your cubic, here's your absolute value, your identity is a diagonal line, and your constant is a horizontal line. I think that's most of them, but check again, make sure you got all the ones out of your notes. If we look at question number 2, we're asked to find the domain of f of x is 1 over x plus 3. Well, we know that we're not allowed to divide by 0, so x is not allowed to be negative 3. The way that that works in the interval notation, though, is from negative infinity all the way to negative 3, but don't use it. That's why I use a parenthesis here. And everywhere from negative 3 all the way to positive infinity. Again, using parentheses means we don't actually use that number, and so this allows us to exclude negative 3 from the set. Question number 3 says we want the distance between 2 points. Well, the distance formula is on the back wall, and it's the distance is x2 minus x1 quantity squared plus y2 minus y1 quantity squared. And I gave you 2 points. They were negative 2, negative 3, and 4, negative 6. So I'm going to say that 4 was my x2, and I'm going to minus a negative 2 and square it, plus the y2 would be negative 6 minus negative 3 squared. The double negatives turn into pluses. Makes this 6 squared, which is 36. Plus this becomes negative 6 plus 3 is negative 3 squared is 9. Becomes the square root of 45. Which breaks down as a 9 and a 5, which breaks as a 3 and a 3, meaning that my final answer would be 3 root 5. Question number 4 asks us f o g of x. Now you have to understand that what this symbol means is to compose, which means to put g inside a function f. I'll use this parentheses method a lot in class. So think of it like this. We're going to take function f, which is 5 times something plus 7. Instead of putting an x where the x always has been, I'm going to leave it empty, or open it up, and put inside of it what function g is. Function g was 2x minus 1. Now all I have to do is distribute to get 10x minus 5 plus 7, which is 10x plus 2. And there's my final answer. Question number 5. We have f of x is 4x plus 7. And we're going to do the difference quotient. I give you the definition of the difference quotient in the question. And one of the things you have to know is what is f of x plus h. If you can do this the same way we did just a second ago on question 4, you know that this is 4 times something plus 7. But instead of using x on its own, I want to use x plus h in the parentheses. See, whatever goes in this parentheses is where it goes where the variable is, or is the variable in the equation. So this just needs to distribute to give me 4x plus 4h plus 7. This right here is f of x plus h. So the formula says to take f of x plus h, 4x plus 4h plus 7, and subtract the original equation. Well, the original equation over here is 4x plus 7, and you have to use parentheses to distribute the negative. And all that's supposed to be divided by h. If we distribute, we're going to get 4x plus 4h plus 7 minus 4x minus 7 all over h. And we're going to cancel our 7s, cancel our 4x's, We end up with 4h over h, and that gives us 4 when we cancel the h's. And there's our final answer. If it doesn't simplify out the h, that means you made a mistake. All right, so number 6. We've turned the page. Over and over again, we're going to end up using the equation y minus y1 equals mx minus x1. This is called the point slope form. So you need a point and you need the slope in order to use it. In question 6, I tell you the point 4, 4 must belong on the line. So you know you have that point, but you need the slope. I do tell you, however, you're going to be perpendicular to y equals 1/4 x plus 3. There are two ways to take this. There's the perpendicular, which is what we're after, and there's the parallel. Parallel is really easy. The parallel means that the slope is the same. Perpendicular, you have to remember it's the complete opposite. So flip it, 4 over 1, and if it was negative, make it positive. If it's positive, make it negative. So the perpendicular slope that I'm looking for is actually negative 4 over 1. Now that I know that, this equation is useless to me. I'm just going to come back here. So y minus y1 would be right here, 4 equals negative 4 for my slope times x minus, and x1 would be the x in my ordered pair. In order to get the multiple choice solution, I need to distribute, which makes negative 4x plus 16 equals y minus 4. If I add the 4, I get y equals negative 4x plus 20. And that would be my final answer there. Oops. Number 7. Number 7, we're going to try to graph a circle. And when we graph a circle, we need to know the center and the radius. The equation is x minus 5 squared plus y minus 1, 20 squared equals 16. To find the center, we're going to dig in to the x and the y parentheses, but take the opposite of what's grouped with x and y, which will be positive 5, positive 1. Then the radius, we have to remember that this is really something squared. This right here is r squared. If we think what squared gives us 4, or 16, the answer would be 4. So now when I go to produce the actual graph, I'm going to come 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 1, put a dot. Then I'll go 1, 2, 3, 4 to the right, 4 to the left, 1, 2, 3, 4 up, and 2, 3, 4 down, and I create a circle that goes through those points. And there we are. Does not have to be a perfect circle, just get it in the right area and we'll be good. Okay, question number 8. If f of x equals the square root of 2x, what's the average rate of change or slope from x1 equals 2 to x2 equals 8? Well, if you plug 2 in, you get 4. Square root of 4 is 2, meaning that the y that is associated with this x is 2. In other words, I have the ordered pair 2, 2. If I put 8 in the equation, 8 times 2 is 16, the square root of which is 4. And so I end up with 8, 4 as another point. The average rate of change is the slope. So I take the change in y's, 4 minus 2, over the change in x's, 8 minus 2. 8 minus 2, 4 minus 2. I get 2 over 6, which reduces to 1/3. 9. I'm asked to find the inverses given x plus 7 over 3, 3x plus 7, and x minus 7 over positive 3. I'm going to do this by inspection, really, just by looking at the equations and deciding which one looks like an opposite. First thing I notice is this is the only equation with times 3. So I don't like putting these two end ones together because they're both divided by 3. So I don't feel like those are good. This has got to work with one of them. The next thing I look for is this says plus 7. I'm looking for something that is the opposite or inverse of that. I see the subtraction by 7. I see the division by 3. So I think that there's a really high chance that those two are the inverses. Question 10, we want to graph h of x equals x minus 3 cubed minus 2. And it says to start with the standard graph. Well, the standard cubic graph, remember, it looks something like this, give or take. Well, what this is really about is understanding what does this negative 3 mean and what does this negative 2 mean. Because the negative 3 is with the x, I'm expecting a right-left motion. And because it's grouped with x, I always take its opposite, which would be positive 3. So I'm going to go 3 to the right. Then this, because it's not grouped with the x, must be a vertical or up or down motion. Because it's not grouped with a variable, I can take it just the way it is, which means down 2. So I'll go down 2. I've literally just moved this point over to here, and now if I resketch the graph, it should look similar. It doesn't have to be perfect, but give me the general shape in the right location. Alright, question number 11, we're halfway through. There is a function that looks like this, 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 and then this. Starting point there. All we really care about on this is the x-axis, but I'll go ahead and draw it all in here. That shouldn't be there. There's negative 1, there's negative 2. We'll call this 3. We ask the question, when is the function increasing? From here to here, all along the surface, the graph is on an upward trend. So that means from negative 1 to negative 2. That is the period of time when it's increasing here. But there's another over here, starting at 3 and going out forever or infinity. That is the area or total areas where the graph is moving upward. Alright, so let's look at question number 12. You're asked to do FG. If you just look at it, really the only thing that makes sense would be to multiply. Function f was 2x minus 7. Function g was 6x minus 3. And we're just going to FOIL. We get 12x squared minus 6x minus 42x plus 21. Which means we have 12x squared minus 48x plus 21. Alright, and then we move on to question number 13. Alright, so 13, we're given 2 points, and we're asked to create the equation of the line that passes through them. Well, we go back to y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. This is not necessarily a memorized formula. It will be available to you the day of the test, but you do want to be comfortable with it and how it works. So the problem with this equation is you need a point and you need a slope. So let's say I pick a point like 6, 6. They gave us 6, 6 and 5, 2. You could use either one of those. The problem is we do not know the slope. So we have to find the slope first by doing the y change over the x change. So I'm going to take 6 minus 2 over 6 minus 5. You could do 2 minus 6 over 5 minus 6, but you just make sure you do the change in y over change in x. That is a change of 4 over a change of 1. So my slope will be 4. At this point, I'm just going to put it in. Y minus 6 equals 4 times x minus 6. That's an acceptable answer. Or y minus 2 equals 4x minus 5. That would also be an acceptable answer. If you chose to distribute this all the way through and clean it up, you would end up with y equals negative 4x plus 18. And that would also be an acceptable answer. Alright, question number 14. Your job is to find the inverse of f of x equals x minus 4 quantity cubed. The first step to finding an inverse is to switch x and y, and then solve for y. So I'll take a cube root of both sides. Now I have the cube root of x equals y minus 4. To finish, I'm just going to add 4 so that I can say the inverse function of f is the cube root of x plus 4, with the plus 4 outside of the cube root. We're getting there. Last page. Question number 15 asks for the domain and range of a graph of a parabola that does something like this, where the lowest it goes is there at -1. First thing we need to state is the domain. Domain is always about right, left. And this graph will go to the left forever, it will go to the right forever. There's nothing that gets in its way. And so we're going to say from -infinity to +infinity. That would be all numbers that are possible. Then range is up and down. Well, this does go up forever, so I'm going to put the infinity on the right, but it does not go down forever. It bottoms out here at -1. Now the question about whether you use a parentheses or a bracket might not be that important because it is a multiple choice question, but the lowest it ever goes is -1, and there is an actual point at -1, so we get to include it. And there's our domain and range. Again, that was probably a multiple choice question. We're going to move on. Question number 16. I give you a slope of 4/5 and a point of 6/5. And right now you should be, really obvious. This is point slope form. Let's just write the equation. Y minus 5 equals 4/5, my slope, x minus 6. And this is an okay equation. It would be really nice, and I'd like a lot if we could clean it up. So y minus 5 equals 4/5 x minus 24/5. But I'm going to add 5 to both sides. So I get y equals 4/5 x. And this right here, if you put it in the calculator, turns out to be plus 1/5. And that'd be our final answer. All right, 17. We're just asking, is a set of numbers a function? The general rule is if x is repeated with different y values, then no. And if you look at the problem on number 17, I used x to be 3, and the y was -5 or -9. That right there should tell you it's not a function. So the repeated 3's really cause you some grief. Tell you, no, it's not a function. 18. We have h of x equals 1 over x squared minus 8. And our job is to rewrite this equation in terms of two functions that could be compressed together. There is more than one way to do this, but for me, this is the way that I saw it. And if you have questions about other varieties, you could just come talk to me. I see this as 1 over something. 1 over something. You might say, well, what's the something? The something would be x squared minus 8. You can imagine me putting this parentheses inside of that equation and creating the original h of x. That's the idea behind it. So these are my two solutions, those two equations. There's two left. Number 19 says we're going to graph f of x equals negative absolute value of x plus 6. And as we go through and produce this graph, we have to remember, standard graph of an absolute value is like this. It's that V shape. But here I'm supposed to go up 6, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, because that's what this tells me. And then this symbol right here tells me to go upside down. And so it's going to create this shape that I have here in black. All right, last question, number 20. We're being asked to find the midpoint of -1, -7, and -5, +7. Now, a midpoint is an average, and so we need to find the average x, the average y. To find an average of two numbers, you add them up and divide by 2. So -1 plus -5 over 2 would be my x coordinate. -1 plus -5 is -6 divided by 2 is -3. That's the x coordinate. The y coordinate would be -7 plus 7 all over 2, which is 0 over 2, or just 0. There's my final solution. Good luck, and we'll see you in class.